Beneath Delaware's quiet landscape lies a forgotten world of secrets. We are venturing into the pine forests, coastal dunes, and farmlands of the First State to uncover ancient enigmas that have baffled experts for generations. By the end, you will possess a collection of genuine historical puzzles that redefine what you thought was possible in early America. How did a forest vanish beneath the waves within human memory, and who carved mysterious maps onto stones by the sea? What does it feel like to stand in a place where the past refuses to give up its answers? The legends of the Nanticoke people are not just stories, they are maps of memory woven into the land itself. For countless generations along the banks of the winding Nanticoke River, elders spoke of a creature of profound power and mystery, a pure white deer. This was no ordinary animal. Its appearance was said to be a direct message, a spiritual omen that heralded moments of immense change for the tribe. Some stories say its arrival preceded a bountiful harvest or the birth of a great leader. Others whispered that its ghostly form in the mist was a warning of coming conflict or a sign that the community must prepare for a difficult journey. The power of this legend lies in its specificity. It is not a vague tale of any forest, but one intimately connected to the bends and marshes of the Nanticoke River, to clearings known only to those who had lived there for 1,000 years. This grounding in real, tangible geography transforms the legend from a simple fable into a historical puzzle. From a modern, scientific perspective, the question becomes fascinating. Could the roots of this sacred story lie in a genuine, observable phenomenon? White or leucistic deer are incredibly rare, their lack of camouflage making them vulnerable and their survival a statistical anomaly. Is it possible that a small, isolated population of these striking animals once lived in the river valley? To ancient observers, the sudden, unpredictable appearance of such a breathtakingly different creature, perhaps on a seasonal migration route or driven by drought to unfamiliar ground, would have been an undeniable event. Its arrival might have coincidentally aligned with other significant occurrences, creating a pattern that seemed anything but random. The legend of the white deer stands at the crossroads of culture and ecology. It challenges us to listen closely. Were the Nanticoke preserving a spiritual truth about the interconnectedness of all life, or were they, in their own way, documenting the behavior of a rare animal whose very existence now feels like a myth? The legend of the white deer speaks to a land observed with sacred attention, but what happens when the land itself seems to speak back, not through stories but through stone? Down along the coast, near the quiet community of Slaughter Beach, lies one of Delaware's most stubborn and slippery mysteries. For decades, reports have surfaced of strange carvings on the large, wave-washed stones and outcrops along the shore. These are not the simple marks of weathering. Witnesses describe something far more deliberate and far more bizarre. The images are said to be of elongated, serpentine creatures, with long necks, flippers, and bodies that some have compared to the ancient marine reptiles known as plesiosaurs. They are petroglyphs, a form of rock art, but they depict animals that have no business being carved on a Delaware beach. The history of these carvings is a shadowy tale of fleeting glimpses and frustrating disappearances. Accounts from local fishermen, beachcombers, and curious residents pop up from the 1950s through the 1980s. Someone would spot the odd shapes at low tide, make a rough sketch, and tell a friend. But by the time anyone returned with a camera or called an expert, the stones were often gone, reclaimed by the shifting sands or buried under a new layer of seaweed. The relentless scouring of salt water and sand, the very forces that may have exposed them, also work to erase them. This elusiveness is central to the enigma. It has prevented any formal archaeological survey or professional authentication, leaving the carvings to exist in the realm of local lore and tantalizing rumor. This absence of proof fuels a heated debate. What are we really looking at? One camp dismisses them as an outright hoax, the work of a bored local artist with an interest in prehistoric creatures, carving the stones for fun or to stir up gossip. Another, more unsettling theory suggests they could be genuine pre-Columbian art. If true, this raises a profound question. What were the indigenous peoples of this coastline attempting to record? Were they depicting a massive, unknown species of marine animal, a sea serpent from their own oral traditions that has since vanished from these waters? Or were the carvings symbolic, representing water spirits or mythological beings, misinterpreted by modern eyes as literal monsters? The local stories add another compelling layer. Some who claimed to have seen the stones insisted the carvings were not random pictures. They were maps. The lines and curves of the creatures' bodies, the placement of dots or other marks alongside them, were believed to be a coded guide. A guide to what exactly? Buried treasure from a forgotten shipwreck, a hidden freshwater spring, or perhaps a route to a significant, but now lost, ceremonial site further inland. The idea transforms the petroglyphs from a simple curiosity into a potential message, a set of instructions left by people who knew this coastline intimately. Without the original stones to study, we are left with echoes. We have sketches based on memory, conflicting descriptions, and a coastline that keeps its secrets close. The Slaughter Beach sea monster carvings challenge our understanding of Delaware's ancient past. They ask us if we are looking at an elaborate prank, a remarkable piece of lost indigenous art, or evidence of something that once swam in the coastal shallows, remembered only in stone and story. The sea keeps its carved secrets buried in sand, but inland the stones stand defiantly in the open. Deep in the woods near the historic town of Odessa, you can find them. Scattered across a quiet forest floor are clusters of massive boulders, some as large as cars, arranged in rough, wide circles and curious linear patterns. They are not the neatly stacked walls of a colonial farm, nor are they the haphazard rubble of a forgotten quarry. Their placement feels intentional, as if someone long ago decided these giants needed to be grouped just so. This is the puzzle of the Odessa stone circles. To the trained eye of a geologist, the explanation is straightforward and elegant. These are glacial erratics. During the last ice age, a mile-thick sheet of ice ground its way south, plucking enormous rocks from the bedrock far to the north. When the climate warmed and the glacier retreated, it acted like a colossal, melting conveyor belt, dropping its heavy cargo in random scatterings across the landscape. What we see in the Odessa woods, according to this view, is simply a spectacular example of natural chance, a geological snapshot frozen for 12,000 years. The stones are where the ice left them, nothing more. Yet, when you stand among them, that explanation can feel incomplete. The human mind is wired to seek patterns, and the arrangements here provoke that instinct powerfully. Some clusters do approximate rings. Certain stones seem to line up with others in distant groups, creating sightlines through the trees. This apparent order has fueled a far different theory, one that reaches across the Atlantic. For generations, local legends have whispered of ancient Celtic voyagers, Druids or pre-Christian explorers from Europe, who crossed the ocean long before Columbus and established outposts on these shores. Could these stones be their work, a ceremonial site or astronomical calendar constructed from the most durable materials available? Enthusiasts have pointed to potential alignments, suggesting that specific gaps between stones frame the sunrise on the summer or winter solstice, turning the forest into a giant, rustic observatory. The idea is captivating, a thread connecting Delaware to the stone circles of Britain, but archaeology deals in evidence, and here, the mystery hits a wall of silence. If this was a human construction, where is everything else? A site of such effort would leave traces. There are no pottery shards, no charcoal layers from ancient fires, no stone tools or flakes from shaping the boulders, no burial mounds nearby. The ground around the circles has yielded nothing to confirm a sustained human presence. This evidentiary void is the strongest argument against the ancient builder theory. It is the difference between finding a single, unexplained tool in a field and finding an entire workshop. The stones sit in a profound archaeological quiet. So we are left with a beautiful tension between what seems possible and what can be proven. Is the Odessa site a masterpiece of natural sculpture, a random assortment that our pattern-seeking brains cannot help but organize into meaning? Or is it the remnant of a truly ancient, ephemeral culture, visitors who left no mark upon the land except the deliberate rearrangement of its heaviest objects? Perhaps the truth is a blend. Could indigenous peoples, encountering these awe-inspiring glacial deposits, have recognized their inherent power and subtly modified them, shifting a stone here or there to formalize a natural sacred space? Without artifacts, the stones themselves are the only witnesses, and they tell no tales. They simply endure, inviting us to wonder if we are looking at a remarkable accident of nature, or the faint, eroded signature of a human idea so old it has been forgotten twice over. The silent stones of Odessa hold their stories close, but other treasures from Delaware's soil speak in a language of pure metal. To understand the next mystery, we must widen our view beyond state lines to the entire Delmarva Peninsula, that long finger of land shared by Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. Here, buried in the sandy earth, farmers and archaeologists have unearthed something that should not exist, not gold or silver, but something far more valuable in ancient North America, worked copper. These are the enigmatic copper hoards. The finds are not random scraps, they are caches, deliberate collections of artifacts buried together. We are talking about spear points, axes, decorative tabs, and sheets of metal, all painstakingly hammered and shaped from pure, raw copper. Some of these buried treasures have been found right here in Delaware, adding our state to a map of mystery that spans the peninsula. The objects themselves are beautiful in their simplicity, a testament to incredible skill. But the moment you ask a simple question, the mystery deepens exponentially. Where did this copper come from? Scientific analysis provides a stunning answer. The metal's signature points unequivocally to the Great Lakes region, specifically the area around Lake Superior, over 600 miles away. Think about that distance for a moment. On foot through dense forests, across wide rivers, and over mountain ranges, this was not a casual trip. This was an epic journey, so the first layer of the puzzle is the sheer scale of the trade network it implies. Who were these people, moving such heavy, valuable material across half a continent long before European contact? The second, and perhaps more baffling layer, is not the journey, but the destination. Why bury it? These were not lost items or trash pits. The hoards were intentionally placed in the ground, often with no other accompanying artifacts, no signs of a settlement or burial nearby. It is as if someone carefully wrapped up their most precious tools and hid them, never to return. This act of concealment sparks a firestorm of theories. One idea is practical storage. Perhaps these were the hidden reserves of a trading group, a buried bank vault meant to be retrieved later. But if that is the case, why were so many never dug up? Another theory leans into the spiritual. Copper, with its unique color and malleability, held profound ritual significance for many indigenous cultures. Burying these objects could have been an offering to the earth, a sacrifice to ensure good harvests, or a ceremonial act marking territory or an alliance. The most provocative theory suggests the hoards are evidence of a shadow culture. Some researchers propose they were buried by a people who predated the known indigenous tribes of the region, a group with different customs who later vanished or were absorbed, leaving only their buried metal as a clue to their existence. This is where science meets a wall. Archaeologists can date the copper, trace its origin, and describe the artifacts, but they cannot definitively name the culture that made them or read the intention behind the burial. The hoards are a clear message from the past, but we have lost the dictionary. Imagine holding one of these copper points, cold and heavy in your hand. You are holding a piece of a continent-spanning network, a fragment of a journey we can barely comprehend. You are holding an object someone valued so highly they chose to give it back to the earth forever. The map is clear. The trade route from the Great Lakes to Delmarva is a line of human connection, but the motive remains buried, locked in the silent logic of a people whose world we are still struggling to hear. This interpretive struggle is the heart of the copper hoard mystery. Each theory paints a completely different picture of the people who buried these treasures. The ritualistic explanation transforms the act of burial into a profound spiritual dialogue. Imagine a small group gathering at a specific bend in a river or atop a low hill with a view of the setting sun. The copper, obtained through such immense effort, represented more than wealth. It was a conduit to the sacred. By carefully placing these brilliant objects into the earth, they were making the ultimate offering. This was a gift to the land itself, to the spirits that governed fertility, hunting, and safe passage. In this view, the hoards were never meant to be retrieved. Their value was realized in the act of giving them away, a sacrifice to ensure balance and favor for the community. The location itself would be the key, a place of inherent power known only to them, which explains why we find no villages or graves nearby. The site was chosen for its spiritual resonance, not its convenience. The practical theory, however, tells a story of commerce and caution. Here, the copper is a commodity, pure and simple. A trader or a group of traders, having completed the perilous journey from the Great Lakes, faces a new problem. They cannot carry all their valuable cargo at once, or perhaps they anticipate danger from rival groups. So they do what people have done throughout history with their most prized possessions: they hide them. They select a memorable landmark, a distinctive tree, a peculiar rock formation, and bury their inventory with the full intention of coming back for it later. But then something goes wrong. Perhaps conflict erupts, a route becomes unsafe, or the individuals simply never return from their next journey. The cache becomes a lost deposit, waiting centuries for a farmer's plow to strike it. This theory frames the hoards as tragic accidents of history, buried logistics rather than buried prayers. The frustrating and fascinating truth is that the archaeological record refuses to decisively choose a side. The very thing that makes the hoards so mysterious, their clean, isolated context, is also what keeps them enigmatic. If they were ritual offerings, we might expect to find other signs of ceremony, perhaps layers of ash from fires, remnants of organic materials like cloth or food, or even symbolic arrangements of stones around the pit. If they were practical caches, we might find evidence of a temporary camp nearby, or the hoard might be located along a logical travel corridor. Instead, we have the copper, the hole, and silence. This evidentiary vacuum forces us to confront a fundamental limit. We are trying to read a single, powerful sentence from a long-lost book. We have the nouns, the copper, the earth, but the verb, the intention behind the action, has faded away. Were they giving a gift, or were they storing a tool? The metal cannot tell us. It simply waits in museum cases, a brilliant question mark forged in fire and buried in darkness, challenging us to decide whether we are looking at an ancient altar or an ancient bank vault. The silence of buried copper gives way to the restless voice of the sea. Along the shifting shoreline of Cape Henlopen, the Atlantic reveals a ghost. At the lowest of tides, when the water pulls back far beyond the usual dunes, a haunting landscape emerges from the wet sand. They are not rocks, but the gnarled, blackened stumps and fallen trunks of an ancient forest, rooted in a seabed, standing in silent rows where waves now crash. This is the sunken forest, and it presents a timeline written in salt and sediment. The standard geological story is one of immense gradual force. At the end of the last ice age, massive glaciers melted, causing global sea levels to rise. The ocean advanced, slowly swallowing the coastal plain. The trees of this forest, perhaps a dense stand of cedars or pines, died as salt water poisoned their roots. They were buried under layers of protective sand and peat. preserved for millennia, only to be exhumed centuries later by the very waves that drowned them. This explanation is clean, scientific, and spans thousands of years. It should be the end of the story, but the waterlogged stumps whisper a different tale to those who listen. Local legends and passed down memories insist this was not a slow geological process. They speak of a cataclysm that happened within living human memory, a single terrible night when the land simply fell away. Stories tell of a great storm, or perhaps a sudden sinking of the coastline, that swallowed the forest whole, trapping it in time. This idea of a rapid, recent submergence transforms the site from a geological specimen into a potential historical event. The debate sharpens with a single, provocative detail. Some observers examining the exposed wood have reported what appear to be tool marks, not the random gnawing of sea creatures or the splitting of weather, but straight cuts and notches and facets that look like the work of metal axes. If these marks are genuine, and if they are on wood that was submerged soon after being cut, the implications are staggering. It would mean people were actively logging this forest, or perhaps using the trees for fortifications or dwellings, right up until the moment the sea took it. Suddenly, the timeline collapses from millennia to generations. This is where science digs in quite literally. Researchers study the sediment layers that encase the stumps, looking for pollen, microscopic shells, and carbon isotopes to date the event precisely. They map the old soil line, searching for evidence of a sudden inundation by salt water versus a gradual encroachment. The findings, however, are often as murky as the tidal water. Peat layers suggest a brackish marsh environment that could have existed for some time, complicating the picture of an instant disaster. Yet the persistence of the eyewitness accounts, the eerie specificity of the tool mark claims, refuses to fade. Imagine standing on that beach at sunset, the water receding to unveil this spectral grove. The low orange light catches the rippled sand, making the shadows between the stumps deep and long. You are walking on a seabed that was once dry land. The scientific explanation feels vast and impersonal, a shift of continents and climates. The local legend feels immediate and human, a story of a community losing a part of its world overnight. Which truth does the landscape hold? Is the sunken forest a monument to a planetary thaw that took centuries? Or is it the graveyard of a forest that stood tall within the span of a great-grandfather's story? The waves offer no answer, only the endless cycle of concealment and revelation, hiding the evidence and then, for a brief moment, laying the mystery bare at our feet. The drowned forest stands as a monument to a lost shoreline, but another stone waits inland, carved not by waves but by human hands, or so the story goes. Tucked away along the wooded banks of Brandywine Creek lies a mossy, unassuming boulder. For generations, it was just another rock in the water, until someone looked closer and saw a story etched into its surface. The markings were peculiar, a series of straight lines and angular cuts that, to an eager eye, did not look random. They looked, some insisted, like runes. This was the birth of the Brandywine runestone legend, a local tale that dared to suggest Norse explorers had ventured far up the Delaware River, leaving their signature deep in the Pennsylvania and Delaware hinterlands. The claim was championed with passionate intensity by amateur historians and local enthusiasts throughout the 20th century. They carefully made rubbings of the marks, comparing them to alphabets from Scandinavia. They pointed to specific sequences that seemed to mirror known runic inscriptions, proposing translations that spoke of voyages, land claims, or memorials to fallen comrades. It was a thrilling narrative, one that connected the quiet creek to the sagas of Leif Erikson, suggesting a footprint of Viking presence hundreds of miles from the only confirmed site in North America, at Newfoundland's Elance Aux Meadows. The legend grew in the telling, becoming a point of local pride and a tantalizing historical what-if. Could Norse ships, capable of crossing the Atlantic, have also navigated the deep Delaware Bay and the winding river, exploring its tributaries like the Brandywine. The academic world, however, responded with a unanimous and definitive verdict. Professional archaeologists and linguists examined the stone and the rubbings. Their conclusion was dismissive, but grounded in evidence. The marks, they stated, were not runes. They were the scars of natural glacial action, the parallel striations left by rocks dragged in the belly of an ice sheet, or more likely, the pragmatic quarry marks of colonial settlers. In the 18th and 19th centuries, such stones were often tested or partially split to assess their quality for building or millstones. The straight grooves and chisel pops were the work of practical men, not ancient mariners. There is no corroborating evidence, no Norse artifacts, no settlement remains, no other inscriptions for hundreds of miles in any direction. The stone sits in total archaeological isolation. Yet even with this professional dismissal, the mystery does not truly die. Its endurance lies in that powerful human question: what if one longship did venture farther? What if a small group, separated from a larger party, left a single crude marker? The myth persists because it plugs directly into our desire for discovery, for a hidden history that rewrites the textbooks. It is also a lesson in how such stories form. We are pattern-seeking creatures. Faced with ambiguous marks, we project meaning onto them. When that meaning connects to a grand, romantic narrative like Viking exploration, it becomes incredibly resistant to facts. The story feels true because we want it to be true, because it makes a familiar landscape feel epic and connected to world history. The Brandywine runestone is likely exactly what experts say it is, a glacial or colonial relic. But its power as a mystery lies not in its authenticity, but in its invitation. It asks us to look at an ordinary creek and, for just a moment, see a highway for dragon ships. It reminds us that history is not just found in artifacts, but in the stories we choose to believe, and why we cling to them long after the evidence has moved on. From the silent stones and buried copper, we ascend to a mystery written in light. The night sky over ancient Delaware was not just a spectacle, it was a library, a clock, and a map. The Algonquian-speaking peoples of this land, including the Lenape, possessed a celestial knowledge that continues to astonish researchers. Their understanding was not casual stargazing, it was a precise, applied science woven into the very fabric of their survival and spirituality. Colonial accounts and enduring oral traditions tell us they tracked the complex dance of planets, marked the solstices and equinoxes with uncanny accuracy, and navigated vast distances using constellations long before European compasses arrived on these shores. They knew when certain stars would disappear and reappear on the horizon, signaling the time to plant corn or the approach of the winter hunts. This presents a profound scientific puzzle. They achieved this without telescopes, without written records, and without constructing massive, permanent observatories like Stonehenge. So how was this sophisticated data preserved and transmitted across hundreds of generations? The answer may be written not in the stars alone, but in the land beneath them. Researchers now investigate a compelling theory that the Delaware landscape itself was their observatory. Imagine a specific, flat-topped hill along the Delaware River. From that vantage point, on the night of the winter solstice, the constellation Orion's belt might set directly behind a distinct, notched peak on the far horizon. That alignment, witnessed year after year, becomes a fixed celestial event. The hill is the viewing platform, the mountain notch is the sighting device. Now follow the river. A bend where the water turns east might align with the rising point of the Pleiades cluster in early spring, a sign celebrated in many Algonquian stories as a time of renewal. A solitary, towering pine on a ridge could serve as a marker for the summer solstice sunrise. In this model, the entire region transforms into a colossal, open-air planetarium. The star map was not on parchment. It was the relationship between the heavens and the hills, the rivers and the rocks. This was a living calendar where the turning of the sky was physically anchored to familiar landmarks. The knowledge was preserved through ceremony and story, by taking the young to these specific places at specific times and showing them, this is where the bear star rests when the frost is hardest. This is where the canoe star rises when the shad return to spawn. The mystery for modern science is decoding this terrestrial cipher. We can plot the star positions of 1,000 years ago with software, and we can map the landscape with lasers. But identifying which natural features held intentional significance is a painstaking detective game. Was that alignment purposeful, or is it a coincidence our pattern-seeking minds have created? Each potential site requires cross-referencing oral history, archaeological evidence of repeated human activity, and precise astronomical calculations. The true scale of this ancient science is only beginning to come into focus. It suggests a way of seeing the world where everything was connected. The soil, the seasons, and the stars were all part of one continuous, intelligible system. We are left looking at the same night sky they did, but we have lost the map that was laid upon the earth. The constellations are still there, but the silent stones and waiting hilltops that gave them meaning keep their secrets, challenging us to learn not just the names of the stars, but how to listen to the land that remembers their old, guiding paths. The stars guided a calendar, but the earth itself held a different kind of power, one that could be forged into tools. Delaware's ancient wetlands conceal a metallic secret within their acidic, tea-colored waters. This is the story of bog iron, a natural resource that reshapes our understanding of early technology here. In the slow, still waters of peat bogs, a chemical reaction unfolds over centuries. As plant matter decays, it leaches iron from the surrounding soil and rock. Bacteria then interact with this dissolved iron, causing it to precipitate out and form dense, rusty nodules scattered through the muck. For people living nearby, these nodules were like finding ore deposits on their doorstep. The process of turning this lumpy, impure material into usable metal was arduous but achievable. Harvesters would wade into the bogs, feeling for the heavy chunks with their feet or using wooden tools to pry them loose. The collected ore was then roasted in a hot fire to drive off moisture and impurities, a step called sintering. After this, it was ready for the smelt. Using a clay furnace and charcoal fed by bellows, artisans could reach temperatures high enough to reduce the ore, melting out the metallic iron from its rocky matrix. The result was a bloom, a spongy mass of iron mixed with slag, which then had to be repeatedly heated and hammered to consolidate it into a workable bar. This technology is well documented in the Old World, from Celtic Europe to Viking Scandinavia, but its confirmed presence in pre-colonial Delaware is a quiet archaeological bombshell. The core mystery is not if indigenous peoples here knew about bog iron, but how deeply they understood its potential. Tiny, refined iron artifacts have been found in archaeological contexts dating long before sustained European contact. We are talking about small awls, needles, and possibly decorative tinkling cones. These are not crude lumps. They are evidence of a sophisticated metallurgical process, from ore to finished object. This discovery challenges a long-held narrative that portrayed the region's inhabitants as strictly within a Stone Age technological framework until Europeans arrived with metal. The debate among scholars is intense. One school of thought argues for independent innovation. The logic is compelling, the resource was locally abundant, and the basic principles of smelting could have been discovered through experimentation with pottery kilns, which also reach high temperatures. Perhaps a curious artisan, firing clay near bog deposits, noticed peculiar metallic beads forming in the ashes and pursued the phenomenon. This theory paints a picture of a self-sufficient, inventive culture mastering a complex craft entirely on its own. The opposing view suggests transference. Could knowledge of ironworking have traveled along those vast trade networks that moved copper from the Great Lakes? Even a single piece of traded iron, or a story of its making from a distant culture, could have sparked local experimentation, accelerating the process. There is also the haunting possibility of very early, unrecorded contact with European fishermen or explorers along the coast, centuries before colonization, who might have introduced the concept. The evidence on the ground is frustratingly sparse. Unlike stone tools, iron corrodes completely in the wet, acidic soils of the region, often leaving only a rust-stained void in the earth. What survives are those rare, tiny finished objects, and occasionally the faint traces of hearths with unusually high temperatures and slag fragments. Each find is a whisper, not a shout. To hold one of these small iron awls is to hold a contradiction. It is a simple tool, yet its existence speaks of furnaces and bellows, of careful temperature control and skilled hammering. It forces us to ask whether the technological history of this land is far more layered and nuanced than our textbooks allow. Were the first people of Delaware not just hunters and farmers, but also, in some small and significant way, early metallurgists, pulling metal from the very marshes that sustained them? The mastery of fire and metal speaks to a profound relationship with the earth, but another kind of monument was built not from what the land offered, but from what the sea provided. Scattered along the quiet shores of Delaware's inland bays, like Rehoboth and Indian River, lie the ghostly footprints of ancient communities. They are not made of stone or earth, but of shell. For thousands of years, the people who lived along these protected waters gathered oysters, clams, and mussels by the millions. The discarded shells did not simply scatter. They were piled layer upon generation, into massive mounds known as shell middens. These were not just garbage dumps, they were accidental libraries. Each layer was a time capsule, preserving a snapshot of life. Within the compacted shells, archaeologists find animal bones revealing hunting practices, fish scales indicating seasonal harvests, broken pottery showing stylistic evolution, and tools lost or discarded. A midden was a communal diary, recording centuries of meals, technologies, and daily routines. The true scale of these structures, however, is now a matter of historical lament and urgent mystery. Early colonial accounts and 19th century surveys describe middens of staggering proportions. Some were reported to be over 20 feet high and hundreds of feet long, small hills glinting white in the sun, visible landmarks from the water. They represented the accumulated labor and sustenance of countless families over unimaginable stretches of time. Today, the vast majority of these immense mounds are gone. They were bulldozed for waterfront development, carted away for road fill, or ground up for chicken feed. Their disappearance is a catastrophic loss of data. With them vanished precise records of how coastal diets changed with rising sea levels, how social structures might be reflected in the organization of the piles, and how trade might be evidenced by the movement of materials. This erasure turns every surviving fragment into a priceless clue. The modern race is against two relentless forces, coastal erosion and time. At remaining sites, archaeologists work quickly, often after a storm has exposed a new section of a crumbling bank. They meticulously map, sift, and catalog, knowing each season's tides may wash away another chapter. Within these remaining middens, smaller, more tantalizing mysteries have emerged. Among the billions of local oyster shells, excavators have occasionally found something that does not belong. A beautifully crafted bead made from a seashell native to the Gulf of Mexico. A cutting tool fashioned from a type of stone only found in the Appalachian foothills hundreds of miles west. A single polished piece of copper, again whispering of distant connections. These outliers are sparks in the dark. They suggest that the people of the inland bays were not isolated communities living solely on what they could gather from their immediate waters. They were nodes in a web of exchange that stretched across the continent. A single shell bead from Florida tells a story of a journey, or a chain of hand-to-hand trades that brought a piece of the warm southern ocean to the cool Delaware coast. It forces us to reimagine these bays not as endpoints, but as busy coastal hubs, where canoes arrived bearing news, stories, and goods from far away. The middens were the final resting place for these treasures, mixed in with the mundane shells of Tuesday's dinner. Studying them now is an act of archaeological triage. Teams use ground-penetrating radar to map the outlines of middens buried under later soil, trying to understand their full footprint without destructive digging. They analyze isotopes in ancient oyster shells to reconstruct the precise temperature and salinity of the bays centuries ago, reading the environment from the dinner plate. Each tiny find, a fish vertebra, a charred seed, a foreign shell, is a recovered word from a lost language of daily life. We are left with a haunting duality. The vanished middens represent a library burned, a permanent silencing of voices from the past, yet the fragments that remain and the strange artifacts within them shout of a world far more connected and dynamic than we ever supposed. They ask us to look at a modern shoreline dotted with houses and docks, and to see, beneath it all, the faint, white outlines of mountains made from meals and the long, forgotten roads that led to their doors. The silent middens hold stories of trade and time, but the wetlands themselves guard a more ethereal secret, one that flickers and fades before your eyes. Deep within the shadowy expanse of the Great Cypress Swamp, and in other secluded marshes across Delaware, a haunting phenomenon has been witnessed for centuries. On still, damp nights, a soft glow would appear, hovering just above the dark water or drifting between the gnarled trees. To the Lenni Lenape, these were not random lights. They were the light of the Lenni Lenape spirit lights, understood as wandering souls, lost ancestors, or sometimes trickster entities. The stories were specific and carried weight. Following such a light was considered dangerous folly, as it could lead a traveler deeper into the treacherous mire, away from solid ground. This folklore was a practical warning wrapped in spiritual meaning, a way to explain a real, observable, and potentially perilous mystery in the landscape. The modern world has a name for these apparitions, will-o'-the-wisps, and science offers a classic explanation. It points to the slow decay of organic matter in the oxygen-poor water. As plants and animals decompose, bacteria produce gases like phosphine and diphosphane. When these gases bubble to the surface and meet the air, they can ignite spontaneously, creating a fleeting, cool flame that seems to float. This marsh gas theory is tidy, logical, and taught in textbooks. It should settle the matter, yet for those who have stood in a swamp and seen the lights, the textbook often feels incomplete. The mysteries begin with the behavior of the glow. Witnesses, from early settlers to modern hikers and hunters, consistently report something that simple gas combustion cannot easily explain. The lights do not just appear and vanish randomly. They are described as moving with apparent purpose. They might retreat if approached or glide parallel to a path, as if leading or pacing an observer. They have been seen to change direction, split into multiple lights, or even, in the most chilling accounts, seem to respond to sound or movement. This reported intelligence is the first major crack in the purely chemical explanation. The second mystery is their stubborn tie to specific, legendary locations. The lights are not reported evenly across all wetlands. They are linked to particular stretches of the Great Cypress Swamp, to bends in certain creeks, to old, abandoned homestead sites. This persistent geographical correlation suggests something unique about those patches of ground, something beyond general decay. Is the soil composition different? Is there a particular mineral layer or a historical event, like a forgotten burial ground, that alters the biochemistry? The locations themselves seem to hold memory, and the lights are its manifestation. The final and perhaps most frustrating puzzle is their elusiveness to measurement. In an age where every smartphone has a camera and sensors are everywhere, reliable documentation of a true will-o'-the-wisp remains exceedingly rare. They appear without warning and are gone in moments, leaving no physical trace. Attempts to capture the gases or measure the electromagnetic fields at the sites of sightings typically find nothing out of the ordinary. It is as if the phenomenon knows it is being hunted and retreats. This evasiveness forces a difficult question. Could there be an unknown geological or biochemical process at work, one that creates light through a more complex pathway than simple gas ignition? Some researchers speculate about piezoelectric effects, where stress on certain swamp minerals generates faint electrical charges. Others wonder about rare, luminescent fungi or bioluminescent organisms stirred from the sediment. Perhaps it is a combination, a perfect fleeting storm of gas, atmospheric pressure, humidity, and an unseen biological contributor. To walk into that swamp at night is to step into a laboratory where folklore and physics collide. You are surrounded by the immense, slow chemistry of decomposition, the very process that builds the soil, and yet, when that faint blue-green glow dances in the distance, moving against the breeze, the ancient stories feel immediately true. You are no longer just observing a chemical reaction. You are witnessing a mystery that the Lenni Lenape understood not as a problem to be solved, but as a permanent resident of the deep, dark places, a reminder that some lights are meant to be seen, but never quite caught. The swamp lights defy capture, but another artifact from Delaware soil was seized, moved, and placed at the very center of a fierce debate. This is the curious case of the Cant petroglyph. It is a large, flat sandstone slab, roughly the size of a coffee table, and its surface is a maze of intricate pecked carvings. The images are diverse and compelling, a collection of spirals, concentric circles, abstract human or animal forms with outstretched limbs, and complex geometric patterns including what look like ladders or webs. Unlike the elusive sea monster carvings, this stone was physically removed from its reported discovery site near Canton in the early 20th century and taken to the University of Delaware for study. It has been measured, photographed, and scrutinized for decades, yet its true story remains stubbornly opaque. The modern history of the stone is a trail of good intentions and lost context. After its removal, it was displayed for years, becoming a local point of fascination, but the precise location of its original discovery, the soil layer it came from, and any associated artifacts were never properly recorded by archaeological standards of the time. This lack of provenance is the first and greatest wound to solving its mystery. Without knowing exactly where it sat in the earth, scientists cannot date the layer it came from or understand what culture might have surrounded it. The stone exists in an informational vacuum, a vivid message with no return address. This isolation fuels three competing theories, each plausible, each problematic. The first is the most thrilling, that it is a genuine pre-Columbian masterpiece. The spirals and concentric circles are motifs found in indigenous rock art across North America, often interpreted as symbols for the sun, water, or portals. The stylized figures could represent shamans or spirits. If authentic, the Canton stone would be a rare and profound example of advanced symbolic thought in the region, a spiritual map carved in stone. The second theory is one of deception, an elaborate hoax from the late 19th or early 20th century. This was an era of intense public fascination with ancient mysteries and archaeological frauds. A skilled local artisan, inspired by newspaper reports of mound builders or Celtic stones, could have created the petroglyph to garner attention or even to sell to a collector. The variety of patterns could point to an imagination drawing from multiple sources, rather than a cohesive cultural tradition. The third, more mundane idea recasts it as a colonial era or early American farm marker. The spirals and geometric patterns might be surveyor's marks, property boundary symbols, or even the idle doodles of a shepherd or farmer over generations, later misinterpreted as ancient. Scientific analysis has stepped in to try to cut through the speculation. Experts have examined the tool marks under magnification. The pecking technique, using a harder stone to chip away at the sandstone, is consistent with ancient methods. However, it is also a technique someone could replicate with a little patience and a steel hammer. The weathering of the carved grooves, called patination, has also been studied. The grooves appear weathered, but determining if that weathering took place over 300 years or 100 is an imprecise science, especially on a stone that was exposed to the elements before its removal. The results are ultimately inconclusive. The evidence does not scream modern fraud, but it also cannot definitively prove great antiquity. The Canton petroglyph thus resides in a purgatory of history, categorized as unprovenanced and unexplained. It is a beautiful question to stand before it is to confront the limits of our detective work. We can describe every curve and line, but we cannot access the moment of its creation. Was it a sacred object, a clever fake, or a practical piece of farm geography? The stone holds its silence, a gallery of enigmatic shapes that invite us to project our own stories onto them, reminding us that sometimes the most tangible pieces of the past are also the most elusive. The carved stone in Canton is a puzzle we can at least touch, but some of Delaware's greatest enigmas lie completely out of reach, submerged beneath the dark, churning waters of the Delaware Bay. For decades, commercial fishermen and marine surveyors have reported strange readings on their sonar equipment. Their screens reveal anomalies on the muddy bottom that defy simple explanation. Stretching across stretches of the seafloor, particularly near historic ferry crossing routes, are long, linear formations that look, for all the world, like walls. These are not scattered boulders or jagged reefs. The sonar imagery shows structures with startlingly straight edges and right angles, arranged in lines that run parallel to the shore or extend out into the deeper channels. They appear too ordered, too geometric, to be easily written off as a random tumble of rocks. The immediate, thrilling question is obvious: who built them and when? The most compelling theory reaches back thousands of years, to a time when the geography of this place was utterly different. At the end of the last ice age, sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. What is now the deep shipping channel of the bay was a wide, fertile river valley, with smaller streams feeding into it. The indigenous peoples who lived there were masterful stewards of the water, and one of their most sophisticated technologies was the fish weir. These were not simple nets. They were elaborate, permanent structures built from stone and wooden stakes, designed to funnel fish into enclosures for easy harvesting. Imagine a V-shaped wall of stones built in a tidal creek, its apex pointing downstream. As the tide receded, fish swimming with the current would be guided by the walls into a trap at the point. It was sustainable, ingenious, and required a deep understanding of hydrology and animal behavior. Could these sonar anomalies be the drowned remnants of such ancient fishing systems, constructed when the valley was dry, now silently resting 80 feet below the surface? If so, their scale would be monumental, representing a colossal, communal effort to manage an entire ecosystem. Another possibility removes human hands entirely, pointing to the immense power of the ice itself. These linear rock piles could be glacial moraines. As the great ice sheet retreated, it deposited ridges of rocky debris along its melting edge. These natural formations can be remarkably straight and long, creating underwater ridges that, to sonar, might look deliberately placed. Then there is a more modern, if less romantic, explanation. The Delaware Bay has been a busy maritime highway for centuries. Ships carrying stone ballast, often cobblestones or cut blocks from European ports, would dump this heavy material overboard in the bay before loading cargo. Over time, repeated dumping in designated areas could create large, linear piles of stone on the bottom. The location near ferry routes lends some credence to this, as these were zones of heavy, repetitive ship traffic. The frustrating truth is that we simply do not know. The bay is a notoriously difficult place to conduct research. The water is perpetually murky with silt, visibility is often zero, and powerful tides make diving operations dangerous and brief. Sending a remotely operated vehicle or mounting a full archaeological dive expedition is phenomenally expensive, requiring specialized equipment and favorable weather windows. For now, the walls remain shadows on a sonar screen. their secrets locked under cold, dark water. They are a perfect metaphor for Delaware's ancient mysteries, a tantalizing shape just beyond our reach, challenging us to wonder if we are looking at the grocery store of a lost world, the scrap pile of a glacier, or simply the ballast of forgotten ships. Each possibility tells a completely different story about the history beneath the waves. These sonar walls are a mystery we cannot yet touch, but other artifacts were placed in the earth with deliberate, tender care. In the dry, sheltered recesses of caves and carefully prepared burial sites across the region, early archaeologists made a series of quiet, profound discoveries. They found bundles wrapped in carefully prepared leather or strips of bark, tied with sinew. These packages were not casually discarded. They were placed with intention, often alongside an individual or within a space set apart. When carefully unwrapped, the contents revealed a curated collection, a personal museum of the sacred. These are what scholars call medicine bundles. Inside, one might find a smooth, water-worn stone from a distant river, the iridescent feather of a hawk, a tiny bone carved into the shape of an animal, and carefully preserved leaves, roots, or seeds of specific plants. Each item was chosen, not at random, but according to a logic we can no longer hear. Modern science can inventory these components with precision. We can identify the species of bird that donated the feather, determine the mineral composition of the stone, and classify the dried plant matter. This is where the mystery truly begins, because the catalog often defies our modern, practical expectations. Some of the plants within the bundles have no known medicinal properties in any surviving ethnobotanical record. They are not pain relievers, antiseptics, or digestives. They are, from a purely pharmacological standpoint, inert. Similarly, the stones, while beautiful, are often not the hardest or sharpest for tools, nor are they rare metals like copper. They are simply chosen. This presents a tantalizing gap in understanding. We are looking at a physical sentence where we know all the words but have lost the grammar. The selection was clearly governed by a complex symbolic and ritual system, a complete language of healing and spirit that has not been passed down. The logic was not merely, this plant cures fever. It was likely a layered combination of story, origin, and symbolic resonance. Perhaps that particular gray stone was collected from a waterfall where powerful spirits were believed to dwell, making it a vessel for that power. That oddly shaped root might resemble a certain animal, linking its essence to qualities like strength or stealth. The hawk feather was not just from a bird, but from a creature that sees the world from a divine perspective, offering clarity. The bundle was not a first aid kit. It was a portable universe, a collection of relationships and stories that connected the carrier to the forces of the land, sky, and ancestry. Its power lay in the specific combination, a recipe of meaning known only to the bundle's keeper and the tradition that taught them. The inclusion of items from distant locations deepens the enigma. A shell from the Atlantic coast in a bundle found far inland speaks of a personal journey, a gift, or a trade item charged with significance. It connects the individual's spiritual practice to a geographic network far wider than their daily life. This transforms the bundle from a local artifact into a map of a spiritual landscape, with threads reaching out across the continent. When we look at a carefully preserved medicine bundle in a museum case, we are not just looking at objects. We are looking at the silhouette of a lost philosophy. We see the physical components, but the connections between them, the prayers spoken over them, the specific moments they were meant to address, all of that has evaporated like morning mist. We can guess that it was for healing, for protection, for ensuring success in a hunt, or for guiding a soul. But the precise intention, the specific spiritual diagnosis and cure encoded in that unique assembly of feather, stone, and leaf, is a conversation we can no longer overhear. It stands as a humble, powerful monument to a complete system of knowledge that saw the world as an interconnected web of meaning, where every item held a story, and every story held the potential to change a life. The sacred bundles represent a personal map of the spirit, but the land itself may have been mapped on a monumental scale. Before plows and developers reshaped the Delaware landscape, it was dotted with ancient burial mounds. Most are lost now, their earth long since spread flat across farm fields, but early surveyors and curious antiquarians left behind crucial notes, sketching their locations on old maps. When researchers plot these historical coordinates, a provocative pattern sometimes emerges. Certain mounds appear to align with striking precision, not randomly scattered, but positioned along straight lines that stretch for miles. These alignments often connect to undeniable features of the world, pointing directly toward a distant mountain peak, the meeting place of two major rivers, or the place on the horizon where the sun rises on a solstice. The immediate question is whether we are seeing a ghostly blueprint or a grand illusion. This is the delicate craft of archaeoastronomy, the study of how ancient cultures understood the sky and reflected that knowledge on the ground. Proponents of the alignment theory argue that these patterns are too consistent to be accidental. They suggest that mound builders chose locations not just for their local beauty or practical defensibility, but as part of a vast, interconnected ceremonial landscape. A line connecting three mounds might also frame the winter solstice sunrise, turning the entire ridge into a calendar marking the year's darkest day. Another alignment could point to a sacred mountain believed to be the home of ancestors or spirits, creating a permanent visual connection between the community of the living and the realm of the sacred. In this view, each mound was a node in a spiritual network, its placement a deliberate act of cosmic cartography. Skeptics, however, urge profound caution. They point to a fundamental statistical reality. If you have enough points on a map, you will inevitably find some that appear to line up purely by chance. With most of the mounds themselves destroyed, we are working from incomplete, often imperfect historical records. Could the handful of surviving alignments simply be the random clusters that our pattern-seeking brains naturally highlight, while ignoring the many mounds that form no clear pattern at all? The sparse physical evidence makes confirmation nearly impossible. Without the original mounds to excavate, we cannot find supporting artifacts or conduct precise on-site surveys to measure sightlines. The case rests on maps and mathematics, a fragile foundation. This leads to the most speculative and controversial interpretations of all. Some researchers, looking at these proposed alignments, see something beyond astronomy or territory. They theorize about ley lines, hypothetical channels of Earth energy said to connect ancient sacred sites across the globe. In this framework, the mounds were placed where this energy was strongest, acting as amplifiers or anchors for a force modern science does not recognize. While this idea captures the imagination, it exists almost entirely outside the realm of conventional archaeology. There is no instrument that can measure a ley line, no experiment that can prove its existence. For mainstream scholars, it represents a leap from intriguing pattern into the realm of modern myth-making, using the ancient past to support a contemporary spiritual belief. So where does that leave us with these ghostly alignments? We are left standing at a crossroads between two ways of seeing. One looks at the plotted points and sees a vanished intelligence, a culture that inscribed its understanding of the cosmos directly onto the hills and valleys, turning the entire region into a temple under the open sky. The other sees the powerful human tendency to find order in randomness, to connect dots into a picture that comforts our desire for a planned, meaningful past. The truth may be forever out of reach, buried with the mounds themselves, yet the possibility endures, a whisper that the quiet fields and forests of Delaware might still hold the faintest echo of a grand design, a pattern laid down so long ago that we can now only glimpse its shadow in the lines between lost landmarks. From the grand alignments of lost mounds, we descend to a mystery of elemental heat. Deep in the woods and along forgotten creek beds, settler diaries and indigenous oral histories converge on a peculiar account. They speak of fire rocks. In specific, secluded locations, certain stones were said to become unnaturally hot. A farmer placing his hand on a boulder to steady himself would recoil from a searing warmth on a cool autumn day. Hunters reported flat stones that felt feverish to the touch, and in the most vivid tales, a faint wisp of smoke or steam would rise from their surface, as if the earth itself were breathing a heated sigh. These were not stones resting in a sun-baked field at noon. The descriptions emphasize a heat that appeared independent of the weather, a latent energy within the rock itself that manifested unpredictably. The immediate question is one of simple physics. What could possibly cause a rock, buried in the damp forest floor or resting in a shaded gully, to generate its own intense warmth? Geology offers a few tantalizing, if unproven, pathways. One possibility points to radioactivity. Certain minerals, like some forms of uranium-bearing pitchblende or monazite, emit low levels of radiation as they decay. While typically not enough to generate noticeable heat, could there be an exceptionally concentrated, localized vein of such material in Delaware's ancient rock formations? If the surrounding stone acted as an insulator, trapping that slow, atomic decay heat, it might create a pocket of warmth detectable to a bare hand. Another theory involves chemistry, not radiation. Some iron sulfide minerals, like pyrite, can oxidize when exposed to air and moisture. This is a slow, rust-like process that releases heat. In a densely packed pile of such rocks, buried in just the right damp conditions, could that chemical reaction build up enough to make the stones genuinely hot? It is the same principle behind the spontaneous combustion of a damp haystack, but translated to the mineral world, a third, more external idea considers optics. Could a particular concavity in a stone, or a unique crystalline structure on its surface, act as a natural lens, focusing diffuse sunlight to a tiny, intensely hot point? This might explain a stone that is hot in one specific spot, rather than uniformly warm. Yet for all these scientific hypotheses, a frustrating void remains. No modern geologist has ever documented such a phenomenon in Delaware with reliable instruments. No team has set up thermal cameras on a reputed fire rock to capture its temperature spike. The tales exist solely in the historical record and in persistent local lore, placing them in a limbo between memory and fact. This absence of proof, however, is precisely what makes the consistency of the stories so compelling. The accounts are not identical, but they share a core of strange, tactile experience. They come from different eras and different cultural perspectives, yet they describe the same bizarre sensation, a stone that holds a hidden fire. This repetition argues against mere hallucination or tall tale. It suggests multiple independent witnesses encountering something genuinely anomalous. So we are left with a classic historical mystery. Were these people profoundly mistaken? Could they have touched a stone that had been heated by a recent, unseen lightning strike, or a shallow, smoldering root fire beneath the forest duff? Or does Delaware's complex geology hide a rare, intermittent process, a fleeting interaction of mineral, water, and gas that generates a temporary heat, a phenomenon so localized and unpredictable that it has slipped through the nets of modern science? The fire rocks, if they ever existed, have gone cold and silent, but their legend lingers as a reminder that the ground beneath our feet is not always inert. It holds potentials we have forgotten how to see, waiting for a curious hand to test its temperature and rediscover a wonder that science has yet to catalog. Legends of fire within stone speak to a hidden power in the land, but another story promised a more liquid form of magic. Deep within the shadowy reaches of the Pocomoke Forest, a region whose ancient woods stretch from Maryland into southern Delaware, a different kind of tale took root. It was whispered among the Algonquian tribes long before the first European ships sighted the coast. They spoke of a secret spring, its waters clear and strangely effervescent, that held a miraculous property. To drink from it or to bathe in its pool was said to reverse the marks of age, heal grievous wounds, and grant a vitality that bordered on the eternal. This was not merely a story of clean water, it was a promise, a geographical secret passed down as both a blessing and a test. When colonists arrived, they eagerly absorbed this local lore, transforming the indigenous legend of a healing site into their own feverish quest for a fountain of youth. The legend, now hybridized, took on a life of its own, drawing fortune seekers into the tangled, swampy wilderness for centuries. Historical records hint at a fascinating parade of seekers. In the 1600s, Spanish explorers, perhaps having heard rumors from converted indigenous guides, are believed to have ventured into the Pocomoke area, searching for this terrestrial miracle to please their king. Later, in the 18th and 19th centuries, local folk healers and water doctors would lead expeditions, claiming to know the secret location passed down through families or revealed in dreams. Even into the early 20th century, newspaper articles recounted the adventures of old-timers who swore they had found the spring as boys but could never locate it again in the overgrown forest. The searches were always the same, a brief flare of hope followed by the swamp's stubborn silence. The spring became a will-o'-the-wisp of geography, always just beyond the next stand of cypress. From a scientific standpoint, the legend presents a captivating puzzle. Could a real, physical spring have inspired such a persistent myth? The answer is a resounding maybe. The Pocomoke region sits on a complex geology of aquifers and mineral deposits. It is entirely plausible that a particular spring could be fed by water filtering through layers rich in certain elements. A spring with a high concentration of lithium, known for its mood-stabilizing and perceived rejuvenating effects, might impart a palpable sense of well-being. Another with sulfur compounds, which have anti-inflammatory and antibacterial properties, could genuinely aid in healing skin ailments or arthritis, creating a powerful reputation. The water's taste, temperature, or even a natural carbonation could have set it apart, marking it as a special place within the ecosystem. The legend, then, becomes a form of amplified observation. A spring with noticeable health benefits, witnessed over generations, becomes mythologized, its powers growing in the telling until they cross the line from therapy to immortality. Yet this logical explanation crashes against a frustrating reality. Despite the searches and the plausible geology, no spring matching the legendary description has ever been conclusively identified and verified in the Pocomoke. Every candidate put forward lacks the definitive, extraordinary mineral profile or the consistent legendary effect. The few sulfurous springs found are minor and unremarkable, their waters not so different from others in the region. The magical spring remains a phantom, a coordinate on a map drawn from hope rather than cartography. This enduring disappearance is the heart of the mystery. It forces us to ask whether we are hunting for a place or an idea. The lost spring of the Pocomoke is more than a potential mineral deposit. It is a mirror reflecting a timeless human longing. It represents the desire to find a cure for our fragility, a direct line from the natural world to our own vitality. The searches themselves became a ritual, a pilgrimage into the wild, not just to find water, but to touch the possibility that the land holds a secret remedy for the universal condition of decay. The swamp, in its endless, patient regrowth, swallowed every path and erased every marker, keeping the secret perhaps because the secret was never in the water alone, but in the enduring act of looking for it. The search for miraculous waters is a quest for a beginning, but the ultimate origin story of this continent remains its deepest enigma. For decades, the textbook narrative was clear and compelling. The first people to set foot in the Americas were the Clovis culture, mighty hunters who crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia around 13,000 years ago. As the ice sheets retreated, they moved southward with incredible speed, their presence marked by a distinct and beautiful artifact, the fluted Clovis point. This elegant leaf-shaped spear point, with its characteristic groove flaked from the base, was considered the smoking gun of human arrival. It was found from coast to coast, and its timeline seemed to lock the human story of the Americas into a neat 5,000-year window. Then the ground began to shift. At a sandy ridge site in Virginia called Cactus Hill, archaeologists made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the entire field. They found human-made stone tools, blades, and scrapers of a simpler, older style, buried in a soil layer beneath a layer containing classic clovis points. The dating was unequivocal. These deeper artifacts were more than 15,000 years old, possibly even 18,000. This was not a minor adjustment. This was a revolution. It meant people were here, living and working, at least 2,000 years before the Clovis culture even emerged. The implications are staggering. If not the Clovis people first, then who and how did they get here? The Cactus Hill findings, along with other pre-Clovis sites like Monte Verde in Chile, shattered the old consensus and opened a door to a far more complex, ancient, and mysterious human journey. The debate is now one of the most heated in all of archaeology, and it is not happening in some distant desert. It is happening right next door, in landscapes that Delaware shares. This is where our state becomes a character in the continent's greatest detective story. At the end of the last ice age, Delaware did not look like it does today. The coastline was dozens of miles farther east, as the ocean was locked up in glaciers. What is now the shallow, murky Delaware Bay was a deep, wooded river valley, part of the massive Susquehanna River system. The climate was colder, drier, with patches of tundra and pine forests. It was a world of megafauna, like mastodons and giant ground sloths, and it was a world that, according to Cactus Hill, humans were already exploring. So the question becomes urgent and tantalizing. If people were living and hunting in Virginia 16,000 years ago, is it possible they also ventured into the river valleys and coastal plains of what is now Delaware? The logical answer feels like it must be yes. The ancient Susquehanna River Valley would have been a natural highway, a corridor of life cutting through a harsh environment. Following game herds or seeking new resources, small bands of these first explorers would have almost certainly moved through this region. They would have camped along its tributaries, hunted in its forests, and left traces of their passage. Yet here we encounter the central, frustrating paradox of Delaware's pre-Clovis mystery. The theoretical evidence is overwhelming, but the physical evidence is, so far, absent. We have not yet found our own Cactus Hill. We have no definitive, datable artifact from that era unearthed on Delaware soil. This absence is not proof that they weren't here. It is a challenge. The landscape they inhabited is now buried under centuries of silt, under modern cities and farms, or submerged beneath the rising sea. Their campsites would have been small, temporary, and left a faint archaeological footprint. Their tools, lacking the distinctive fluting of the later Clovis points, might be harder to recognize, easily dismissed as natural stones or later artifacts. Finding them requires not just luck, but knowing exactly where to look in a world that has been utterly transformed. The proximity to Cactus Hill makes this silence all the more compelling. It is like hearing a loud conversation in the next room, but being unable to see the speakers. We know the activity is happening just beyond our view. Every archaeologist working in Delaware today carries this question in the back of their mind. When a farmer brings in an unusual stone found in a field, when a construction project cuts into a deep, ancient soil layer, when erosion exposes a new bank along a creek, the hope is always present. Could this be it? Could this be the artifact that places Delaware firmly on the map of the first Americans? The search is for a needle in a haystack that time itself has buried. It rewrites not just history, but our sense of place. To walk the banks of the Delaware River today is to walk atop a lost world, a landscape that may have witnessed the earliest footsteps of human discovery on this continent. The mystery is no longer just about who was here first. It is about what lies beneath our feet, waiting for a single, decisive find to connect our local soil to the grand, unfolding story of how an entire hemisphere was peopled. The answer is out there, hidden in the deep strata, a secret kept for 15,000 years. The giant birds of legend cast long shadows, but their echoes might be captured in stone. Among the many lost artifacts of Delaware is a particularly striking report, that of a large petroglyph depicting an enormous, eagle-like bird, often referred to by researchers and local historians as a thunderbird carving. This image was said to be pecked into a rock face at a site that was later destroyed by 20th century development. The description is vivid: a bird with a powerful, hooked beak, vast outstretched wings, and talons capable of grasping large prey. Unlike the abstract patterns of the Cant stone, this was a representational image of a creature of immense power. Its loss is a profound frustration, but the idea it represents opens a doorway to one of the most fascinating theories bridging time itself. This is not merely a question of art, but of memory. Paleontology tells us that for millions of years, North America was home to truly gigantic birds. The teratorns, for example, were vulture-like raptors with wingspans reaching 25 feet or more, large enough to cast a moving pool of shadow on the ground below. They soared over the same landscapes where early humans eventually walked, and they only went extinct around 10,000 years ago, a blink in geological time. This timeline creates a staggering possibility. The ancestors of the Lenape and other Algonquian peoples could have witnessed these magnificent, terrifying creatures firsthand. The theory is both simple and revolutionary. What if the thunderbird of legend is not a purely mythical invention, but a cultural memory of a real animal? The petroglyph in this view becomes not a symbol of a spirit, but a portrait of a living creature that once shared the sky. This idea transforms how we interpret such images. A carving of a giant bird is no longer just a spiritual icon. It could be a form of historical documentation, a way of saying, "We saw this." It bridges the gap between paleontology and archaeology, suggesting that human folklore can sometimes be a vessel for ecological truth passed down across hundreds of generations. The mechanics of such memory transmission are mind-bending to consider. For the idea to hold, a detailed description of the animal, its behavior, and its appearance would need to survive orally for over 300 generations without writing. This seems impossible by modern standards, but indigenous oral traditions are not mere gossip. They are highly structured mnemonic systems. Knowledge was embedded in stories, songs, and ceremonies, repeated with precise rhythm and detail at specific times of year. A sight as awe-inspiring as a teratorn, a bird that could blot out the sun, would be an event seared into community consciousness. Its image might become a fixture in the teaching stories of a clan, a permanent character in the narrative of the world. The story would evolve, of course. Over millennia, the real bird might accumulate symbolic weight, becoming associated with storms, creation, or spiritual power. Its literal reality might blend with its metaphorical meaning, but the core visual description, the essence of a giant raptor, could remain intact. This is where the theory meets its greatest challenge and its deepest intrigue. Proving such a connection is nearly impossible. We cannot ask the artist who made the lost petroglyph what inspired them. We cannot carbon date an idea. The evidence is circumstantial, a coincidence of timing and imagery that is powerfully suggestive, but forever just out of reach of scientific confirmation. It requires us to accept that human culture can be a deep time recording device, preserving echoes of a world that vanished long before the first pyramid was built. So we are left with a haunting question whenever we look at indigenous rock art depicting powerful animals. Are we seeing a god, or are we seeing a neighbor? Is the thunderbird a magnificent metaphor, or is it the remembered shadow of a teratorn, its likeness slowly distilled from observation into legend over 10,000 winters? The lost carving is gone, but the question it prompts remains, challenging us to consider whether the oldest stories we have are not fiction at all, but the longest memories on Earth. The memory of giants fades into the whispers of the tide, but another kind of industry once thrived along that same restless edge. For generations, archaeologists walking Delaware's beaches and coastal marshes have noticed peculiar, thick-walled fragments of pottery, often found in dense concentrations near old, brackish inlets. These are not the remains of cooking pots or storage jars. They are the shattered pieces of large, crude clay basins, their interiors frequently coated with a stubborn, crystalline residue. When analyzed, that residue reveals its secret. It is salt. This is the quiet evidence of an ancient coastal enterprise, the systematic harvesting of salt from the sea. The basic technology was straightforward in its demands, but immense in its labor. Large clay pots would be filled with seawater and placed over sustained fires. As the water boiled away, layer after layer of salt would be left behind, to be scraped out and packed for use or trade. It was a simple chemical process, but its scale hints at something far more complex. The fragments are not rare. They are found in such abundance at certain sites that they speak of repetition, of a practice returned to season after season, year after year. This was not a casual hobby, it was production, and this is where the clear water of fact becomes murky with mystery. We understand the how, but the who and the why are profound puzzles. The first question is one of social organization. Was this a seasonal ritual undertaken by family groups? Imagine a community moving to the coast in the warmer months, setting up temporary camps to boil seawater, creating enough salt to preserve their winter meat and flavor their food for the year ahead. In this model, salt making is a communal chore, a part of the annual rhythm of life, like planting or hunting migrations, but the sheer volume of pottery fragments suggests another, more intriguing possibility. Could this have been the work of specialists? Was there a group of people, perhaps living year-round in certain rich coastal areas, who mastered this craft and turned it into an economic engine? Salt was not just a seasoning in the ancient world. It was a necessity for preserving food and a valuable commodity that could be traded far inland. A society with a surplus of salt held a powerful bargaining chip. This theory paints a picture of a more stratified, trade-oriented culture along the Delaware coast, one that produced a prized good for exchange with communities upriver and in the interior. The salt makers would have been pivotal figures, their work connecting the coast to a vast network. This leads directly to the second and perhaps more frustrating mystery. If this was a specialized industry, where are the villages that supported it? Where are the permanent settlements, the middens full of domestic debris, the burial grounds of the people who tended these fires day after day? The coastline itself holds the answer, and it is a destructive one. The very environment that made salt production possible also conspired to erase its architects. Sea levels have risen and fallen, storms have scoured the shore, and the salty, wet conditions are brutal on organic remains. Wooden structures, tools, even human bones, dissolve in this corrosive setting far faster than in the dry uplands. The clay pots, thick and fired, are among the few things tough enough to survive, and even they are found only as fragments, so archaeologists are left with a hauntingly incomplete ledger. They have the product, the salt residue, and the heavy machinery, the broken pots, but they are missing the workers, the managers, and the homes. It is like finding a factory floor but no town around it. The silence is deafening. This gap forces us to reconsider the landscape. Perhaps the major settlements were not right on the exposed coast, but slightly inland, along the protected tidal rivers that offered safer harbors and fresh water. The salt-making sites would then be seasonal work camps, satellite stations where people labored but did not permanently live. Yet, even these inland locations have proven elusive, buried under centuries of sediment or modern development. The mystery of the salt makers ultimately questions the complexity of Delaware's earliest coastal economies. Were they simple, self-sufficient communities taking what they needed from the sea, or were they part of a more interconnected, ambitious world where commodities flowed along invisible routes and certain places thrived because of a unique, valuable skill? The evidence permits both visions. The truth may lie in the pattern of the pottery itself, in the subtle differences in clay composition that might trace vessels to specific inland clay sources, mapping the supply lines. It may lie in the discovery of a single preserved post hole from a shelter, or a hearth site with a different character. For now, we have the salt and the fire, but the people remain just out of sight, their society a silhouette against the rising steam of 1,000 boiling pots. Salt pots held the taste of the sea, but other stones in Delaware were said to hold a voice. Along the winding, tree-lined banks of Red Clay Creek, a peculiar piece of folklore persisted for generations. In certain spots where the water carved its way through ancient quartzite bedrock, particular stones were known to whisper, not figuratively but literally. Those who lived and worked along the creek, from farmers to fishermen, would speak in hushed tones of boulders that emitted a faint, almost musical humming. The sound was not constant. It was most often heard in the still, damp air of dawn or in the heavy, charged moments before a summer thunderstorm. It was a sound felt in the bones as much as heard by the ears, a low vibration rising from the earth itself, as if the stone were singing a secret to the morning mist or murmuring a warning of the coming tempest. This was not a story of a single, magical rock, but of a phenomenon tied to specific geology and specific weather, a pattern that lent the tales an air of stubborn credibility. The human mind is quick to find meaning in such anomalies, and so the whispering stones became oracles. Some believed they were the voices of ancestors, their spirits woven into the quartzite. Others thought the stones were reacting to the pressure changes in the atmosphere, acting as a natural barometer. The most practical saw them as a simple sign, a reliable cue that rain was imminent and it was time to secure the tools and head for shelter. Yet beneath the layers of interpretation lay a raw, sensory experience reported by multiple, independent witnesses across decades. This consistency demands a natural explanation, and geology offers several compelling, if unproven, possibilities. The first theory listens to the wind. Quartzite is an extremely hard, dense stone, but it can be fractured. If a particular boulder is laced with deep, narrow fissures, the right wind speed and direction could turn it into a giant, rudimentary flute. As air is forced through these tiny channels, it could produce a harmonic hum, much like blowing across the top of a glass bottle. The conditions would need to be precise, explaining why the sound was rare and tied to specific atmospheric states before a storm. A second idea turns to temperature. Quartzite expands when heated and contracts when cooled. During the rapid temperature shift at dawn, or the sudden drop in pressure before a thunderstorm, the stone's surface could be stressed. Microscopic grains of quartz rubbing against each other under this stress might generate a collective, piezoelectric hum, a faint release of sonic energy from the crystal structure itself. A third hypothesis looks downward, to the water that gives the creek its name. The Red Clay Creek Valley is a network of underground springs and seeps. Could the sound be the distant, amplified echo of water, forcing its way through subterranean cavities beneath these stones? The vibration might travel up through the bedrock, turning the boulder into a natural speaker for the hidden aquifer below. Each of these explanations is elegant and grounded in known physics, but here the mystery hits its most frustrating wall. In the modern era, with digital recorders, sensitive microphones, and vibration sensors, no one has ever reliably captured the phenomenon. Expeditions to the noted locations at the reported times have yielded only the ordinary sounds of the forest and the creek. The whispers have fallen silent for science. This leaves the accounts in a peculiar limbo, a class of mystery defined by the gap between human perception and instrumental proof. It is possible the sounds were real, but so subtle and situational that our blunt technological attempts to record them are inadequate, like trying to capture the scent of rain with a camera. It is equally possible the experience was a synthesis of suggestion and ambient noise, the brain interpreting the sigh of wind through distant pines, the groan of a tree root, and the rising buzz of insects before a storm as a unified, seemingly supernatural melody emanating from the stone. The truth of the whispering stones may be forever locked in that moment of personal, unrepeatable perception. They represent those fleeting intersections where the landscape seems to communicate directly with those who know it best, in a language that evaporates the moment an outsider arrives with a notepad or a microphone. The stones of Red Clay Creek may have truly sung, or they may have only sung in the attentive ear of the listener, but in either case, they remind us that some of the oldest mysteries are not puzzles to be solved, but experiences to be remembered, a faint vibration on the edge of hearing that asks us to consider how deeply a place can be known, and how quietly it might choose to speak. The stones held their silence, but the people knew how to brew a different kind of power from the leaves. Among the most profound and enigmatic rituals practiced by the indigenous peoples of the Southeast, including those in the Delaware region, was the ceremony of the black drink. Historical accounts from early European observers describe a scene of solemn gravity. Men would gather in a council, and a specially prepared tea, dark as coffee, would be served in large shell cups. This was not a social beverage, it was a sacred purge, a ritual reset for the body and the spirit. The drinker would consume great quantities, and soon the powerful emetic effects would take hold, resulting in intense, deliberate vomiting. To the outsiders, this seemed bizarre, even barbaric, but to the people performing it, this violent purification was essential. It cleansed the individual of spiritual contamination, prepared them for diplomacy or war, and created a state of focused, alert clarity. The physical act was a metaphor, expelling not just food, but anger, deceit, and impurity, leaving the participant empty and ready to be filled with truth and purpose. The mystery here is not the ceremony's meaning, but its very existence. How did they discover this? The source of the black drink was the yaupon holly, a small, evergreen tree native to the coastal plains. Its bright red berries are a winter food for birds, but for humans, the plant in its raw state is not just inedible, it is actively problematic. The leaves contain caffeine, theobromine, and a mix of compounds that, if simply chewed or steeped cold, would likely cause severe gastric distress without any of the desired, controlled ceremonial effects. The secret was in a preparation so specific it feels like a chemical formula passed down through dreams. The leaves had to be carefully harvested, then parched or roasted over a fire. This roasting process, which early colonists noted was done with meticulous care, changes the chemical makeup of the leaf. It likely reduces certain bitter, irritating tannins and alters the compounds, making the subsequent brew potent but manageable. Only after this precise heating were the leaves boiled for a long time, creating the concentrated caffeinated tea. The resulting drink was a powerful stimulant and a reliable emetic, a combination that produced the exact physical and mental state required for the ritual. This is where science meets a wall of wonder. The path to this knowledge is utterly lost. Yaupon holly does not look like a food plant. It offers no obvious clue that it holds a potent psychoactive secret locked behind a precise ritual of fire and water. The trial and error process that led to this discovery is unimaginable to us. Did someone, millennia ago, observe animals behaving differently after eating the berries or leaves? That seems unlikely given the required roasting. Did a desperate people, experimenting with every green thing during a famine, accidentally toss some leaves into a fire and then, later, boil them in a pot, noticing the strange, invigorating properties of the resulting broth? The odds against that specific sequence of events are astronomical. It suggests not random experimentation, but a deep, sustained, and intuitive dialogue with the plant world, conducted over generations. Someone had to notice a subtle property, remember it, and then someone else had to have the insight to apply heat, and another to try boiling. This knowledge was then codified, ritualized, and passed on as sacred law. It represents a pinnacle of ethnobotanical understanding, achieved without laboratories or written records, a complete mastery of a plant's hidden potential. The black drink ceremony is more than a historical curiosity. It is a testament to a different way of knowing. It forces us to acknowledge that ancient peoples possessed a science of their own, a rigorous, experiential science where the body itself was the laboratory and memory was the database. The recipe was not written on parchment, but in the steps of a ceremony, in the songs that accompanied the roasting, in the strict rules of who could prepare it and when it could be consumed. That entire epistemological world, the countless observations and accidents that led to the final, perfected practice, has vanished. We are left only with the description of the tea, dark and bitter, and the profound ritual it fueled. We can analyze its caffeine content, but we cannot recover the first person who dared to taste it, or the visionary who first understood that this plant, treated just so, could open a door to the spirit by first cleansing the temple of the body. Beneath the plowed fields and quiet woodlots, the earth holds another kind of silence. For generations, Delaware farmers clearing new land or digging fence posts have broken through into unexpected hollow spaces. Builders excavating foundations have uncovered walls where there should only be soil. These are not natural caves. They are subterranean structures, often circular or rectangular rooms built from carefully fitted stone, buried completely underground with only a narrow entrance at the surface. The official explanation has always been practical, even mundane. They are colonial root cellars. These cool, damp spaces were essential for storing vegetables like potatoes, turnips, and apples through the winter, preserving the harvest in the days before refrigeration. This classification seems to settle the matter, turning a curious find into a simple relic of early American homesteading, but the ground tells a more complicated story. The mystery begins when you start asking basic questions about these buried rooms. Many are discovered in the middle of what was once dense, old-growth forest, with no historical record of a farmstead, cabin, or dwelling anywhere nearby. There are no foundation stones, no scatter of antique nails or pottery, no overgrown family cemetery. The cellar exists in total isolation. Other structures exhibit a construction style that feels oddly ancient. The stonework is dry-laid, meaning no mortar holds it together, relying on the precise placement of each rock for stability. The arches are corbelled ceilings, where each layer of stone slightly overlaps the one below to form a dome, are techniques found in prehistoric structures across the world. They are sturdy, elegant, and built to last centuries, far beyond the needs of a temporary farm storage pit. A colonial root cellar was typically a hurried, pragmatic affair, dug into a hillside and lined with whatever stones were handy. These chambers feel deliberate, permanent, and strangely disconnected from the surface world we know. This disconnect fuels a quiet, persistent debate. Could some of these structures predate European arrival entirely? Archaeologists recognize several possibilities that fit the physical form. One is the storage pit, a common feature of many indigenous agricultural societies. These were not just holes in the ground, but carefully engineered spaces, sometimes lined with stone or clay, designed to control temperature and humidity to preserve seed corn, dried meats, and other vital surpluses. A well-made storage pit could be used for generations. Another, more spiritually charged possibility is the sweat lodge. Many eastern woodlands tribes used semi-subterranean lodges for ritual purification. A stone-lined pit would hold the heated rocks, and the earthen cover would contain the steam and the intense heat of the ceremony. These were sacred spaces, places of prayer and renewal, and their location would be chosen with care, often away from the main village for privacy and spiritual focus. A third, more speculative idea points toward ceremonial chambers or even early astronomical observatories, where the entrance might align with celestial events. The central problem, however, is a profound lack of evidence. These chambers are almost always found empty. No pottery shards, no bone fragments, no charcoal from ancient fires, no tools left behind. They are swept clean by time, or perhaps they were intentionally left that way. This void makes scientific dating nearly impossible. You cannot carbon date a stone. Without organic material trapped in the mortar, there is no mortar to test. The soil around the structure is often disturbed by centuries of tree roots and animal burrows, confusing the stratigraphy. So we are left with architecture without context, a room without a story. This evidentiary vacuum allows the simplest explanation, the colonial root cellar, to maintain its hold. It is the logical default, a classification that requires no rewriting of history, but the simplicity of that answer gnaws at the curiosity. Why build such a permanent, labor-intensive structure so far from any home? Why use a complex building technique for a simple potato bin? The landscape itself seems to hold a memory that the records do not. Each empty, silent chamber becomes a question mark carved into the bedrock. It challenges us to look at a patch of ordinary forest and wonder if we are standing atop a forgotten granary that fed a village 1,000 years ago, or a sacred space where steam once rose with songs now lost to the wind. The stones do not speak, but their very presence in places they should not logically be, whispers of a human footprint on this land that might be far older and far more enigmatic than our tidy histories allow. The silent chambers lie empty, but other resting places speak a language of deliberate arrangement. When archaeologists carefully excavate ancient burial sites across Delaware, they uncover patterns that are both methodical and deeply mysterious. The bodies are rarely found as complete skeletons laid peacefully to rest. Instead, the bones are often gathered together in bundles, sorted and stacked with care. These are secondary burials, a practice where, after the flesh had decomposed, the remaining bones were collected, sometimes cleaned, and then reinterred in a communal pit or a sacred space. Alongside these bundles, we find grave goods, but their selection is not random. Consistently, certain items are placed with a specific orientation. Shell beads, tools, and carved stones are frequently positioned to point westward, toward the setting sun. This recurring, directional practice is far more than a funeral custom. It is a physical clue to a lost spiritual map, a concept scholars call the path of souls. The theory, pieced together from similar practices across Eastern North America, suggests a profound cosmological belief. The soul's journey to the afterlife was not an instant transition, but a perilous voyage. After death, the spirit would travel west, following the path of the sun into the underworld. There, it might face trials or need to cross a great river in the land of the dead. The grave goods were not just sentimental offerings, they were supplies for this journey. The shells might be currency for a ferryman. A small tool could be needed to overcome an obstacle. The westward orientation was a compass setting, a final act of guidance from the living to ensure the departed did not become lost in the spirit world. The scientific mystery here is one of profound limitation. Archaeology excels at recovering the physical facts. We can map the burial pits, catalog every bead and bone, and statistically confirm the westward bias in the artifact placement. This gives us the skeleton of the ritual, the what. But the flesh and blood of the belief system, the living why, has vanished. The archaeological record is silent on the specific songs that were sung as the bones were cleaned. We do not know the stories told about the trials of the underworld, or the exact prayers offered to speed the soul on its way. Were there specific ceremonies held at different phases of decomposition? Did certain family members have the sacred duty of handling the bones? What dreams or visions inspired the belief in a Western land of the dead? These are the nuances that transform a cultural practice into a window into a complete worldview, and they are almost entirely lost. We are left with a ghost of a belief system, its outline visible in the arrangement of objects, but its emotional and spiritual resonance forever out of reach. It is like finding a beautifully crafted compass without its map, knowing it pointed purposefully, but not knowing the full landscape it was meant to navigate. This gap forces a humble recognition. We can reconstruct the ritual, but we cannot fully inhabit the faith. The path of souls reminds us that the most significant journeys ancient people undertook were not always across physical landscapes, but into realms of belief, and we can only stand at the trailhead, observing the direction they pointed, forever wondering about the destination they so carefully prepared their loved ones to find. These puzzles are more than just local history. They form a collective legacy, a single, sprawling question mark written across the entire state. Each unsolved riddle, from the sunken forest to the copper hoards, acts as a puncture in the smooth fabric of the past, revealing glimpses of a far more intricate human story. They are crucial because they defy the easy summary. Delaware's ancient history is not a simple timeline from primitive to modern, but a layered tapestry of innovation, spirituality, trade, and profound adaptation. These mysteries force us to replace a simple narrative with a complex conversation, one where indigenous metallurgists might boil salt by the sea, while astronomers charted the stars from forest clearings. They reveal a people who were not passive inhabitants of the land, but active participants in a dynamic, continent-spanning network of ideas and goods. The very existence of these enigmas is a testament to that forgotten complexity. They stand as permanent correctives to our assumptions, reminding us that the depth of human experience here stretches back for millennia in ways we are only beginning to fathom. Furthermore, these puzzles humbly illustrate the limits of our own knowledge. For every question science has answered about glacial erratics or marsh gas, a dozen more resist its tools. We can trace copper to the Great Lakes, but we cannot read the intention behind its burial. We can date a shell midden, but we cannot hear the conversations held around that ancient feast. The stubborn silence of the Canton petroglyph, the elusive behavior of the swamp lights, the frustrating emptiness of the underground chambers, all these gaps are not failures. They are boundaries. They map the current coastline of our understanding, showing us where the vast ocean of the unknown still begins. This is not a cause for despair, but for wonder. It means the past is not a closed book, but an active dig site, with new pages being unearthed and misinterpreted chapters being revised. This enduring uncertainty is what keeps history alive and breathing. It transforms the landscape from a passive backdrop into an active partner in discovery. A walk along Cape Henlopen is no longer just a beach stroll, it is a visit to a drowned world. A hike through the Odessa woods becomes a detective's examination of a glacial or human design. The Brandywine Creek shifts from a pleasant waterway to a potential Viking highway in the imagination. These mysteries invite everyone to become a sleuth, to look at the familiar fields and forests with new, questioning eyes. They create a bridge between the professional archaeologist with ground-penetrating radar and the local farmer who turns up a strange stone in his field. They foster a shared respect for the hidden stories sleeping under the soil, a collective understanding that the first state's first chapters are still being translated. This legacy matters because it cultivates a deeper connection to place. It asks us to listen, not just look, to wonder about the hands that carved the stones, the eyes that tracked the constellations, and the voices that told the first stories of this land. These unsolved mysteries are not holes in our history, they are portals. They are invitations to keep looking, to keep questioning, and to approach the ancient landscape of Delaware not with the arrogance of those who have all the answers, but with the humility of those who are still learning to hear its oldest whispering truths. Our journey ends here, but the search never truly does. Every forest path, every plowed field, every stretch of shoreline holds the potential to rewrite a story we thought we knew. These whispers from Delaware's soil are a gift of perpetual curiosity, a reminder that the past is not a distant, dusty artifact, but a layer just beneath our feet, waiting for a moment of attention to reveal itself. So the next time you walk along a creek bank, look a little closer at the stones. When you hear an old local tale about a strange light or a forgotten mound, listen a little more intently. You might be the one to spot the next clue, the next artifact, the next piece of the puzzle that connects us all to the deep human mystery of this land. What stories does your corner of the world hold? We would love to hear your own local legends and discoveries in the comments below. If you enjoyed this exploration into the unknown, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for more journeys into history's greatest enigmas. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep wondering.